What up? This build is a life stacker. It converts Energy Shield into a massive amount of life, then uses that gigantic life pool to scale spell damage thanks to Sacrifice, Support, and Rathpith Globe. It also recovers around 15 to 20,000 life per second, so it's pretty much unkillable. It is only available in Phrecia League, so if you're wanting to play this in regular PoE, too bad. Before we jump into it, help us out with that typical YouTube busy work, like, subscribe, and hype the video if you're on mobile. These all tell YouTube to show our content to more people, which helps us keep doing this. One more quick disclaimer here. We are recording this before GGG has posted the patch notes for the event. We will update the build as needed. You can find the POB on Mobalytics, any updates will happen there. It's just an unfortunate reality of the way time works. It only goes the one way. Path of Building has also not been updated yet for Phrecia League. It may be, but at the current moment we're just using the 3.26 alternate trees in order to have access to those in-game trees, like the Bog Shaman that we're going to be talking about here. Let's talk about Blade Vortex. Blade Vortex is a physical damage spell that you pick up around level 12, so in Act 1, but you're not really able to use it until you complete Act 4 and unlock Unleash support. And let's show off why. So when you get Blade Vortex, you can cast it, it summons one blade that swirls around you for 4 seconds, and then that's kind of it. The damage on it really isn't that great at one blade stack, and by the time that you've cast out several blades, not moving around or doing anything, it's going to already be expiring again. What you really need to make Blade Vortex work is Unleash support, which allows you to charge up several extra casts of a spell by not casting the spell for several seconds. So as you can see here, we'll click it once and it'll cast it 5 times all at once. You don't get Unleash support until you finish Act 4. You need to be level 38 in order to use it, so Blade Vortex really isn't usable until that point. But that's not all you need. You also need skill effect duration and area of effect. But once you have them, it's an incredibly strong skill. It has pretty good base damage due to the fact that it gains increased hit frequency for each blade and more damage for each blade. That's a pretty huge amount of damage, and it's really easy to maintain 10 stacks of Blade Vortex once you have Unleash support and you have a decent amount of skill effect duration. You're able to just walk around right-clicking every 4 seconds or so, and that's pretty much it. You zip through packs of enemies, they get shredded and die. This is an actual spell, though. It's not a damage over time effect, so it's able to crit. It's able to scale very effectively with all the normal sources of spell damage scaling. So now let's talk about the Bog Shaman Ascendancy and why it's so good for Blade Vortex. The first 2 points you take with your first Ascendancy are Toad Packed. They give you 50% projectile speed, 50% area of effect, and 50% skill effect duration. It also gives you minus 20 all res. These are pretty big positive bonuses, so there, I guess, needs to be some sort of downside. Area of effect and skill effect duration are both relatively difficult stats to come by in the passive tree, and this is a massive amount of both of them, and it really helps you get Blade Vortex up and running very easily right as soon as you finished Act 4. Your next 2 points go into Vile Imprecations, which gives you nearby enemies have Malediction. Malediction is basically a 10% bank error in your favor, both in terms of enemy damage dealt and in terms of enemy damage taken. It's just a really, really good basic passive node. Then things get a little weird for Bog Witch. Fell Fin is your third option. It really does seem to be the best one for your third Ascendancy. It is 0 Chaos Res for you and for enemies, so at that point in the progression of the character, 0 Chaos Res for enemies is going to be pretty worthless, but you'll probably be at negative 30 Chaos Res by the time you're doing your third Ascendancy, so this is still better than nothing, even though it's not amazing. Eventually this will become an incredibly powerful node because you're going to do a lot of chaos damage, but during the campaign you really won't be. The final Ascendancy that you're going to take on Bog Shaman is Sanguine Power, and this is just a collection of horrible downsides in service of one really insane upside. So it removes all your energy shield and gives you minus 3 max life per level. The default bonus is 12 max life per level, so this changes it to 9, so it's a pretty big penalty if you were to take this during the campaign. But what it does is it makes it so that all of the max energy shield on your equipped armor items, so that's helm, body armor, gloves, boots, and shield, all get converted into max life. So if we look here in the gear section, basically your ideal setup is just to run super energy shield heavy pieces of gear. We're talking about like a 1200 energy shield plus Twilight Regalia. We're talking about a Twilight Regalia with over 1200 energy shield, helmet with over 500, things like that. You can do a mix of energy shield and life, but you're going to actually get more life out of running energy shield on all these prefixes than you would out of having life, for the most part. And so by setting all of that up and having the tree fully unlocked, we can get up into the 20,000 plus life range really easily. Now on its own, that's not anything that'll give you damage, but the sacrifice support makes it so that when you cast the linked spell, so in this case Blade Vortex, you sacrifice 20% of your current life and gain chaos damage equal to 55% of the life that you sacrificed. So just to do a little napkin math here, if you have 23,811 life and you spend 20% of that on a spell, that's 4,700 life. 55% of that being converted into chaos damage is 2,600 flat chaos damage. Then you can just scale it up in the usual way, crit damage, void manipulation, and that is how you turn life stacking into dealing damage. Of course, that's not the only way to turn life stacking into dealing damage. We also use Rathpith Globe, which gives crit chance and spell damage based on player max life. As you can see, this is about 90% of our damage. If we take this off, our damage goes from like 38 million to 3 million, so it's a pretty big deal as well. Even before we get all of the life scaling and sacrifice online, we can still get some value out of Felfin, though, just by running an obliteration that gives a large chunk of physical damage as extra chaos. If you have enemies with 0 chaos res, then that's just going to be a pretty decent extra chunk of damage, in addition to the obvious quality of life of having enemies explode when they die. Now, because we get so much crit chance out of Rathpith Globe with life stacking, we're able to run Mariline's Fallacy. This is an amulet that's super cheap to get normally. It has an insanely high global crit multi-modifier on it. It also gives your crits Culling Strike, and the only penalty is 40% less crit chance, which is usually a death sentence for it, but in a build like this where you have very, very, very high crit chance, like well over the cap, if we take this off, well over 100% crit chance, it's totally worth like dropping down into the high 80s or 90s. All right, now let's talk about leveling the build. So for the purposes of really just doing like an underpowered test just to see how well this would work in the worst case scenario, we leveled a basically unascended witch. Technically this character did run the first labyrinth and go to occultist because it looks cool, but then the points are unallocated. There are only 2 points, never did any other labs after that. You know, this effectively was an unascended witch just to see like, you know, will this build work with none of these bonuses that Bog Witch is going to get and are going to make it much, much, much more powerful. And it was awesome. It steamrolled through the whole campaign. So we do have a very basic setup here in the leveling section of the skill gems. And so because you can't really use Blade Vortex for the first 4 acts, you just want to use Ethereal Knives. You can hook it up to like added lightning damage and arcane surge initially. You can hook up to some crit related stuff later on. Ultimately, you're just going to be kind of walking through areas and just flicking ethereal knives at enemies, and it actually feels pretty good to use. That's pretty much all you do for, you know, the first few hours of the campaign. You take a lot of the usual like mobility stuff, Frostblink and Flame Dash. Clarity is always good to have pretty much throughout the whole campaign. I think it's still equipped on this character and turned on. Yep, you can level it up to, you know, somewhere in the range of like 5 or 6, and then that's a good place to stop leveling Clarity. 4 to 6, something like that. You'll never have to think about mana for the rest of the campaign. You can see this character doesn't even have a mana flask equipped anymore, went double life flask for the last couple of acts. The reason that this all works is that once you get into Act 2 and you unlock Heralds, you unlock Herald of Thunder, Herald of Ice, Herald of Ash, and Herald of Purity, you can spec into all of those at once. You can pick all of them up and just equip them all. And that's exactly what we did. So we started out coming up this way, taking the usual stuff at the start here, Heart and Soul and Practical Application, like have enough stats. Practical Application is really good early. It helps you have enough dexterity to be able to actually use Ethereal Knives. And then Life is always good in the early campaign too, right? So as soon as you're able to get up here and take this Mana Mastery, you'll be able to equip 3 of the Herald skills all at the same time, and you can keep this locked in long term, or you can eventually drop it later. You're going to come around to Presage and Discord Artisan, as well as the Reservation Mastery here, and this just gives you a massive amount of damage because you're running 4 different Heralds. They're giving you increased damage for each of them, and then another 8% increased damage for each of them as well. You're getting increased effect of the buffs, which is just a big damage bonus on top of your Ethereal Knives, and then Presage obviously gives you that mana reservation efficiency, so you can fit in that 4th one. So, you know, it also comes with some increased area of effect, which helps with clear too. So you're just running the classic setup basically of like physical damage spells and heralds. So Herald of Ash, Ice, Thunder, and Purity, you're running all of those. They also look cool, tons of great MTX for them as well. Good MTX for Ethereal Knives and Blade Vortex too, so that's like, you know, another really big selling point for this build. Then pretty much you're just going to continue through the rest of the trees. We have some very basic setups here, just some basic power charge stacking. You're going to use power charge on crit support, and you can do that. We have a recommendation of skills to use on Blade Vortex. You can use these on Ethereal Knives until you're able to get Unleash and Blade Vortex up and running. So for the character that I have here, it obviously didn't have the Bog Shaman Ascendancy bonuses, so it had to come down and take things like Potency of Will and the Duration Mastery to be able to make Blade Vortex work at all. And then the second skill effect Duration Wheel really made it feel good. You're not going to have to do that on the Bog Shaman. Coming down and taking Potency of Will and the more effect Duration is still going to make it feel really, really easy to play. So that's worth doing, but you won't have to come around to this side at all, as we have shown off in the tree here. Like, we have the mid-campaign around, like, level 49. We're coming down here, getting some life. You can maybe come over here and take Sentinel if you want for a bit of free resistances, but you don't have to. You definitely don't have to take exceptional performance at all. Then you pretty much just finish out by coming out to the west, out into the Templar area, getting a bunch of crit bonuses, a bunch of damage and life, and, like, more power charge-related stuff. Some life recovery will help a lot as well, especially toward the end of the campaign and kind of the early in-game. And then the real linchpin for the build will be making that transition into actually finishing out your Ascendancy, getting Sanguine Power, getting a lot of energy shield gear to make that work is going to be super important. You definitely want to do that first. This is probably the biggest weakness of the build. Rathpith Globe is not mandatory to make this build deal damage. It'll definitely still be able to clear maps, you know, make some progression into the end game without a Rathpith Globe, but it's going to be a humongous multiplier on your damage. So really getting that as quickly as you can is going to be essential, depending on how many people are playing the build and how much demand there is for it. It may be expensive. That's just something we can't really predict. Once you have it, though, it's pretty much going to be off to the races. Your damage is going to be scaling up very quickly from that point. And as far as actually getting a bunch of energy shield gear, that really shouldn't be that difficult because of the way the Genesis tree works. It has just printed out so much good gear already throughout all of Keeper's League, and it's definitely going to be the case in the Phrecia event as well. So one thing you can do is run Righteous Fire. This is optional, but because you have so much life in a full in-game setup, you can run Righteous Fire, and Righteous Fire gives you 40% more spell damage at level 21. It does give you a bunch of degen, but you know, it's a pretty huge damage increase. Like, we're looking at 38 million DPS here with Righteous Fire turned on. If we turn it off, it goes down to 27 million. Also, there's the possibility of running Dissolution of the Flesh, which is a very weird jewel. It makes it so that you have no energy shield, which we already have that going on in the build. It gives you 30% more max life, and then instead of losing life when you take damage, you reserve life. So I can show that off in game right now. I have Righteous Fire equipped, and you obviously can't run these together for reasons that'll make sense real quickly. So instead of taking damage, it is just reserving all of my life. If you reserve more than your full life from taking too much damage, you die. When that life is unreserved, it doesn't fill back up. So it's a little clumsy to use a Dissolution of the Flesh. It does give you 30% more max life, which is super awesome for POB, but you can't regen out of this. You just literally have to stop being hit for 2 seconds in a row, which can be kind of rough in some situations, so it's maybe not worth using. So we did set up 2 very similar but slightly different trees for Dissolution of the Flesh. Basically, we just dropped some life regen and added Dissolution of the Flesh to one of them, and you can see the damage goes up quite a bit. But it's not an insane value because you do have to give up Righteous Fire, whereas you could just use Righteous Fire and have regular life regen and not have to think about that weird jank. But you can see the life difference is 23k versus 31k, so it's a pretty big damage bonus. Pretty big life bonus too. I guess they're the same thing. We do run blood magic in this build. You know, we have insane amounts of life and insane amounts of life regen, so it's fine if we run blood magic. Like, what's the difference of spending, 48, 50 life on a spell? We are able to still run an aura by running Eternal Blessing and Zealotry because we have no mana being reserved on any spells. We can do Zealotry, and then that's pretty easy. Then we even get a juiced up Zealotry out of that too. The rest of the skills, we actually have some empty space in our gear. Like, we're not fully loaded up on spells. Automate Steel Skin, Righteous Fire optionally. You can use Enduring Cry with Urgent Orders to generate endurance charges if you want. You could use a summon Golem, summon Ice Golem with cast with damage taken. Again, if you want, you've certainly got the life to support doing that, and then just like shield charge, Assassin's Mark on hit helps as well for like really juicing up your single target damage. So we are using the implicit, the kind of classic trick of gain an endurance charge, Eldritch Implicit on our body armor, and then we're taking endurance charges around the tree. We're also taking some of the small passives that give increased duration, so we can be rocking basically a permanent 5 endurance charges. We can kind of juice that up a little bit quicker with the Enduring Cry around packs of enemies. We just get up to 5 endurance charges very quick, and then permanently locked in on that. We're also running 2 Grafts. So we're running 1 Return to Dust just because it's fun to slam stuff with increased max life, and then the other one, we're doing Hardening Graft. That's the plan, is increased max life. Again, that's really the biggest value you can get out of any graft. It's just that increased max life prefix on the Grafts. So 2 Grafts with increased max life, and you're looking at like 23,000 life. We looked around at a bunch of different Foulborn uniques, and nothing really popped out as being super usable. And yeah, that's pretty much that as far as the build goes. I think the only other tech that's probably worth mentioning is just the classic setup of running a Light of Meaning and Unnatural Instinct in the middle of the tree. There are so many nodes in the middle of the tree. Light of Meaning will apply this massive bonus to all of them. You can use a lot of different versions of Light of Meaning here. Max life, increased chaos damage, crit chance, any of those can be really good. You're taking a bunch of points, so that's like that bonus is working, and then Unnatural Instinct on an overlapping section will give you that same bonus on all of these other small passives that you aren't actually putting points into, as well as just giving you a bunch of good stuff, you know, skill effect duration, area of effect, stuff like that. So that's the build. Blade Vortex is a super fun skill, life stacking is a super awesome archetype, and we're definitely excited to play around with this. In Phrecia League, it's something that looks like it's going to be pretty cool. Alright, that's it. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and finally thank you to all of our channel members. If you want to support us and help us make more PoE content, consider becoming a channel member as well. Thanks for watching. Bye.